Well,
So,
it's setting it up.
okay.
Oh, it says it. Streaming live.
Yep. Now it says on the screen, Deb, streaming live. So,
Okay.
and
Hold
there's
on.
a delay. So don't try and watch it on Facebook. It'll mess you up. So, where this is, this is real time here. All right. Well, let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to do some introductions. So on the bottom right corner, you have Debbie Love. Debbie Love is the wizard behind the curtain that is running the show. So, uh, any technical questions or anything like that, go to her. And then on the upper left corner, you have George Anderson. George and I've known George since 1996. George is a loan officer, PLM, investor. Uh, we've known each other for years and years and years. I consider George my counterpart as far as nerdness. And when I mean nerdness, meaning knowing the industry that he's in. You guys all know I know my industry. George knows his industry. And then Jason Eldridge, I think we met around 2002, was it, Jason, around
Yeah,
there?
right on the money. That's when probably 02, 01, right when New Reach began.
Right. So
They sent me to sell the software to you. They're like, oh, you need to go talk to Rob.
yeah, so I was at a company that's the office is no longer. There was a realty executive's office, and Jason has a product that's a research firm. They called New Reach, and since he's actually bought the company since then, it's now called Property Landing. And so he was knocking on doors to brokers selling it. It was, and so they went, and so even way back then in 2001, they said, great. If Rob likes it, we'll buy it. So I was always the technical nerd in the company.
You're back in that
and this,
corner, back in that corner office, right? Go
yeah,
see Rob in the corner.
yeah. So Jason sat down, showed it to me, and I went back and said, hey, I like this. Let's do it. So, so that's how Jason and I met. And that was back. So I've known Jason about, 18, 19 years. I've known George, 23 years. I know George longer than most of his kids. So I'm getting text messages,
Yeah.
can't sign in. Debbie, people are saying they can't sign in. So I don't know what they want me to do. I don't know why they do. We need to start putting your phone number and email and all the communication so they don't try and text me.
Yeah.
So Richard couldn't get in, but I told him to ping you. He pinged me on. Let me see who that was. That's Danae. Get a hold of Deb.
Well,
I'm gonna text.
it's streaming on Aubrey and Associates group now.
Okay. So anyway, I don't have time to sit there and handle the technical calls. So anyway, so let's get going. If you don't know me, my name is Rob Aubrey, and I am a principal broker here in town. I've been licensed for 28 years. I moved to Utah in November of '95. Got licensed as soon as I moved here. So I've been up and down the crashes and different types of markets and such like that. And I actually like a market shift personally because I know what to do. A lot of brokers, it's kind of interesting because they're like, oh crap, they walk around for 6 months mumbling. And by then I'm way down the road, taking market share, which is what we're doing right now. I'm working with my coach and, we're working on gaining market share right now. So anyway, so the big question on everybody's mind, you're starting to see it in the media. It's starting to creep into the media's dialogue, if you will. The real estate, the recession, and and recession from 2008 recession has really got a bad name, right? I mean, when we think of recession, we think most recently of 2008, and that was a disaster economically, and really it was a real estate crisis that caused a recession, not a recession that caused the real estate crisis. So, and George, so I've invited Jason and George, and we're going to talk about, are we going to predict what's going to happen? No, because there's no telling what's going to happen with the virus and how long the economy is going to shut down. But my opinion is the economy is not going to stay shut down because I believe that at some point that the healthy Americans are just going to strap on a sidearm and go back to work. I mean, that's just my opinion. So, I mean, they're not going to stand for this for too long. They're just not going to. We're not going to have a
Right.
government shutdown of the economy. It's just not going to happen. So that's my opinion on that. But anyway, so I brought Jason and George on. Let's talk about where are we in the economy of real estate, right? Where are we in the real estate industry? And so George is going to talk about, so I'll let George go first. He's going to talk about the characteristic traits of the previous recessions. So George, why don't you tell us about those?
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Rob. Yeah, I started in the business back in the summer of 1989, and that was kind of the middle of the savings and loan debacle. And it only got exacerbated when we went into the Gulf War in 1990, 1991. And, there was, there was a recession. I mean, if you want to call it up to that point. And during that time, I don't know if anybody remembers, but there was a guy named Paul Volcker, and he was increasing the federal funds rate. He felt the best way to fight inflation was to be able to make the economy so miserable that he just kept raising rates. And the Fed actually at that time had raised the federal funds rate to like 12%. The federal funds rate today is 0, just so that you have a comparison, a reference point on that. And what that ended up doing over time is that the banks couldn't borrow money at a cheap enough rate to lend it out with any kind of a margin. And so you had a liquidity crisis, and then with the war and everything else, even though the war was short-lived, you had a situation there where you had rising interest rates, and rising interest rates is really what contributed to that. And then you had a very similar situation happen. And I in the absence of 9/11, what we have going on now, to me, this is just my personal opinion, feels a little bit more like the Y2K, where Y2K is coming. Everybody's got opinions on, well, what could happen January 1st and all this other stuff. And there was this, hoarding, everybody going out and buying computers because they thought you had to have a new computer because your computer was going to crash and airplanes were going to fall from the sky, and all this stuff happened on New Year's Eve. And then you come out after, a few weeks after it, and they're like, oh, it really wasn't so bad. But there were some resets in the housing market back then, but you had, some different undertones. You also had a little bit more supply on the market than what you do right now. And then that was really what contributed to it in the crash of 2008. So there's 3 different cycles that I've seen. And each one of those cycles has had, there's obviously there's going to be an element of speculation. And I'm sure Jason can talk a lot more about that, the kind of speculation that was going on in the prior housing crash, the one that was most recently in 2008. But there's always going to be some sort of an element of speculation on it. But the ingredients that need to be there to create a housing bubble are historically are always going to be one of 3 things. It's going to be higher interest rates. It's going to be an oversupply of housing, or it's going to be too easy of the money is going to be too easy to get. And so you did have that in 2008. Obviously, everybody's heard of the liar loans and all the other stuff that was out there. For principal residents, for somebody who's a primary residence purchasing their own home to live in, that's just not available. There is a level of that available for investors doing fix and flip. But it's very interesting. I had a conversation, it was actually emails going back and forth late last night with a good friend of mine that actually has a hedge fund that he runs back in Chicago. And he provides non-owner occupied money for flips. And he is reevaluating his whole business model right now because he just doesn't think that the appetite out there is that there's as much of an appetite for that. There's so much competition, crowd trying to crowd into that space that he thinks that there's going to be enough millennial buyers and enough younger buyers and everything else that people are feeding back into the market, that there's so much supply for owner occupied qualifying for a loan housing that it's going to start crowding out, the opportunities for what he thinks are the good opportunities for flips. And another friend of mine, who used to go and buy homes at the auction, he doesn't do that anymore because he says the homes are basically selling for market value at the auction. because we have so little supply and so much demand. So the three factors that were always that at least one, if not two or three of them that were present in all the previous housing bubbles, just from an economic standpoint, from a mortgage lending standpoint, were easy money that became too easy and allowed people who never had a chance of really making their payments to be able to get into houses. We don't have that anymore. The people who are qualifying for loans now, they can afford the house, and that's going to be a separate discussion. We had rising interest rates, or we had an oversupply of housing. We don't have any of those three ingredients in our current market right now. And to me, this feels more like a Y2K thing where, we don't know that it's going to be over on January 31st, but I don't think anybody's expecting that we're going to be sheltering in home until, the 4th of July. I don't think I concur with Rob on his opinion that this thing is, sooner or later, we're going to strap on our sidearms and go back out and go to work. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, Rob, and I'm happy to, listen in and get some more wisdom from you gentlemen.
If you have questions, use the Q and any of the audience. If you have questions, not on Facebook, if you're on the actual webinar, then use the Q&A, and then Debbie will interject with the question. So, and then with that, so basically what George has just laid out is the three, the previous housing situations had, one or a combination of the three items. One, you had very easy money, or you had very high interest rates, or you had a very oversupply of homes. And what he's saying is we don't have any of those. And if you're in real estate, obviously you know that. I mean, rates are still below 4. Yeah, they dipped for a brief moment below 3, but that was but historically,
One day.
Yeah, historically rates averaged around 7.5 up until maybe say the last 5 or 6 years. If you take out the last 5 or 6 years, the average interest rate over the last 50 years has probably been around 7.5. So we're still historically ridiculous on the interest rates. And if you're in real estate, then we don't have a supply of homes. I mean, we have a housing shortage. And that's where I want to bring Jason in. Jason's going to talk more numbers and details about where we are in the housing shortage. So without further ado, Jason Eldridge.
Hey, Rob, before I do that, I actually do have one question for George with regard to
Sure. Oh, yeah.
How the rate and for most everybody, but for how the rates work, because I saw something from a agent that I work with out of Vegas that was really good. George could do the same thing, but she basically took the interest rates versus the home price and showed, she was talking about how she got her client into a 2.8 mortgage or a 3.25, something ridiculously low. And then she just showed if we went up to 5.5, how much that changes. So,
right.
More rates are probably more important than, not more important, but they definitely have a lot more pull than actual home price and affordability.
Right.
Yeah, and I posted a video about 2 weeks ago, and the just a real rough correlation on it is that a 10% increase in the price of home is more than offset by a 1% decrease in the interest rate.
Sure.
So if you had a housing price that went up 10%, but you can get your financing at 1% lower than somebody who bought their house 2 years ago, you're going to have a lower payment. You're going to have that lower interest rate by 1% more than offsets a 10% increase in housing prices. And, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I mean, we were in the high 4s, and some people, just an average rate of 4 3/4. Well, we're more than 1% lower than that right now. So that that completely cancels out any increase in housing prices that we've had in the last year and a half, 2 years. And that's a separate discussion that Rob we'll talk about.
Yeah,
but,
we're actually going to.
You're right. The interest rate carries more weight.
We're actually going to do another podcast in the future here real soon, talking about housing affordability. How does the housing affordability work? How do you calculate it and where we're at? Because I know for me personally, where I'm at on rates now, the home I own today, which I paid significantly more money than I paid in 1991, but my house payment's the same because interest rates were so high back in 1991 that my 1991 house payment is the same as it is today. And, my income's a little higher too. So, it's actually really good.
All right.
Well, thanks, Rob, and thanks, George.
Yeah.
So I'm really going to talk
Yeah.
about, what's happening in the housing market. A lot of it new construction based, though. I'll talk to both, but we're going to talk about supply and demand. And the one nice thing, so my background, in addition to Property Landing and New Reach, is that I've been able to work for 3 different home builders, D.R. Horton, Richmond American, and then recently I helped a for rent REIT come to Utah called American Homes for Rent, who they own 52,000 for rent single family homes across the nation. And I was able to get them into about 1,000 lots over the last 14 months. So as a contractor, but so I'm very connected in the home builder market. Last couple weeks, I've been making calls to division presidents that I know and sales reps that I love them all, but the ones that I really trust that will give me the traffic numbers and the statistics. And they've all said that they haven't felt a blip yet. They feel like they probably will, but the traffic's been much stronger. It's been super real. So it's decreased a little bit, but the traffic has come in. They're writing the same number of contracts, if not more. They feel
Right,
like that'll change a little bit. Exactly. The people are coming in are really coming in to make that decision, take advantage of the rates. So I'm going to talk about supply because George talked about it, hit on it. The last time we had our recession in 2000, because we were in the data so well, we could see it coming in late 2000, early 2007.
Right.
And then I got my own experience in the summer of 2007 trying to refi a investment property where my buddy called and said, "Hey, those loans are gone." I'm like, "What do you mean they're gone?" He's like, "I can't find them. I'm going to hit refresh again, but I can't find your loan." And so, we saw it coming a little bit faster, but that one, the differences, and George talked about it, is with so much supply and what we'd call complete unoccupied homes, basically spec homes. I remember a few instances driving through subdivisions where there was one in particular in Traverse Mountain. The builder's no longer around, so I'll mention them, but it was J. Ballard Homes. And they literally had 40 or 50 for sale signs. It was like something we saw in Vegas, but we hadn't seen it here yet in Utah. We literally turned the corner. It was for sale signs up and down both sides of the street. We went, uh-oh, it's here. It's just not as bad and it's hidden. I do remember, and I brought some of my old notes out, Salt Lake County in 2008, third quarter, had 1,097 spec or complete unoccupied homes just sitting there. And so that's something we won't see here. In fact, some of the numbers I'll talk about in a little bit, we're running at a deficit on new construction. And so if you're a buyer, and it'll mellow out now, obviously with this, this virus that we're working through, it will, builders will have time probably to catch up because they won't be building as many specs. They just won't do it. So as far as numbers go, though, and one thing that's important is the numbers that I'm quoting are a combination of data from the MLS, WFR MLS, Construction Monitor, Kem Gardner Institute, and then our own data that we research through Property Landing. So it's a culmination of the 3. Permits totals are going to be more based out of the Kem Gardner Foundation. They seem to be, Construction Monitor is great, but they seem to be a little bit quicker, Kem Gardner. So I'm going to talk about new construction closings, and what you'll see, and anybody who's used to new construction on the MLS, is only about 30% of new construction homes are posted to the MLS. That's historically based around specific builders don't list all their inventory. They might just list a unit. And additionally, with the new change in what we can post as far as, coming soon, I forget what they call it.
Cooperation.
Yeah, the cooperation. That's going to shrink even more because builders would put, coming soon. They'd have 10 homes coming soon in a subdivision. They can no longer do that. But I'm going to go off of last year numbers because they're pretty consistent, 2019, and we're just finished the first quarter. But about 30% of homes, new construction wise, are posted on the MLS. So last year across the state of Utah, there were 4,757 single family homes that posted as closing. These homes were built between 2018 and 19. We like to kind of give a little bit longer run on some of those because it's taking so long to get them built. In reality, and so there were 4,757 single family homes on the MLS that posted as sold. Multifamily, this includes condo, townhome, and twins. There were 1,956. Permit wise, there were actually 11,872 single family permits pulled last year in Utah, and multifamily there were 5,752. However, when you run the 30% number that's been posted on the MLS, the actual new closings, and this can be validated through Construction Monitor fairly easy, were about 15,000 new construction homes, single family, and 6,400 multifamily. So if you take those numbers and let's say that on the multifamily you had 6,400 closings and you pulled 5,700 permits, you're running at about a 11% deficit based upon absorption. The single family is more like 26% deficit on absorption. So going back to one of George's comments on the oversupply, we're extremely undersupplied. And so, you know, I've gotten a lot of calls in the last 3 weeks, specifically in the last week, you know, what's going to happen, what's going on, because we've done so many market studies and I've been in the research side for 15 plus years. I have no crystal ball. This is obviously something totally out of left field. And I love George's analogy of the Y2K because you just didn't know. You know, right before I got into real estate, I was working for a real estate software company, and one in particular was doing the Y2K migration for American stores or Albertsons. And so there was a specific team dedicated to finding every COBOL programmer that they could dig underneath the rock and making those changes to the codes. And I remember American stores paying something like 15 or 20 million bucks over 18 months to make sure they're ready, and then nothing happened.
And they could have bought a $200 software patch, you know.
Yeah, that group made a lot of money on the conversion.
Yeah,
so it's a
That
great
was the
analogy.
revenge of the nerds for sure.
Yeah, it really, well, and I don't mean, because since I am sort of one, I'm okay with that analogy. But
Oh yeah, no, it's an awesome one.
We were digging them out of everywhere we could find them, and these guys were making, you know, 60, 70 bucks an hour. They couldn't believe it. And we just said, well, save your money, please, because this is a one and done thing. But that analogy, I think, is really good because there was so much uncertainty like we're facing now. But we also knew that, I think this one's actually a little bit better in the fact that we know our enemy. We know what, you know, we're getting better ideas on how to work it. We're understanding each day how the virus works. With Y2K, I mean, it could have just been lights out. That was much more scary. You just didn't really know what would happen. But going back to the housing component, we're at extreme undersupply. Builders continue to sell through their subdivisions at record pace. I do believe that will, in the second quarter, will drop, not dramatically, but we'll definitely see the numbers, and that will give us a good idea. However, in the new construction side, a lot of the builders are running at a 8 to 9 month backlog anyway. So I don't know that they'll look at this as a sigh of relief, but they also, it'll give them time to basically get off this, you know, this light warp and say, okay, what are we doing the rest of the year? How are we going to change our projections? So those are, you know, some real basic numbers, but at the same time, it's really quick to identify how short we are with new construction product. And a lot of these guys are so good at what they do, they're not going to do it for practice. So don't expect, I wouldn't expect, and this might sound crazy, but I wouldn't expect home prices in new construction to drop hardly at all. And unless there's a bunch of specs in the area, I actually could see it going up, which some people might think I just popped a green horn out of my forehead, but they're not going to build because they have to.
Right.
So their prices probably will not decrease. I don't project that.
No, I don't see that either. I mean, you would have to, in order for prices to actually come down, you'd have to have more sellers than buyers.
Right.
And so do you have any data on how many houses were short? I mean, I know Jim Woods talks about that a lot.
Yeah, Jim Wood talks about it a lot. Well, I mean, those numbers alone. So if you were to say, you know, if you had an actual closings of 15,000 new single family homes along Utah and you had 1,182 permits, your actual number on number would be what, 3,138 homes short. if you went off the pace of last year, or 26%. So I do have those deeper numbers. And then with the multifamily, it would be 6,400 minus the 5,700, so about 800. Now, if we go back, the number that might make that more real is that on the WFR MLS, the single family sold last year as a whole were 37,000.
Okay.
And so, will it push people to the existing market? Maybe. That's price dependent, but the existing market, and I can't speak to it as much, might go flat or take a couple percentage hit. I don't know, but new construction, I don't see them having to do anything. They just won't build as much. They'll
just slow down and allow the
sadly,
prices to keep
yeah.
increasing.
Sadly, they'll slow down. Maybe they have some small layoffs. I don't know. Builders have been running very short on staff anyway. Like most of them did not staff up again like they were in the prior housing boom. Some of the bigger ones did, but they also tripled their inventory and their output. So they went to scale. They didn't overhire. Some of the other things that we'll talk to the new construction shortage and why I don't think we're going to have issues there is that there are about 7 factors that I want to discuss with new construction, just bullet points. One of the things that's harder and harder is it's taking longer and longer to get projects through the entitlement process.
Right.
So historically, when I say historically, 5 years ago past, you could get something from literally purchased to raw ground to approved and started developing it in 6, maybe 8 months. Now we're at 12 to 18 months from actual acquisition or identification to getting product into the ground. So we're already at a deficit, and then it's taking longer than ever to get things through. You're going to have still a housing shortage on the new construction side. Cost of land, as we all know, is oh, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, and now with the current circumstance, I would imagine there's going to be like a bubble in the pipeline of acquisition of raw ground to, that based on, I mean, just look at the real estate commission where they literally suspended your need for fingerprinting because, I mean, you can't get fingerprinted.
Yep.
So they're like, okay, what are you going to do?
Great point. So any county meetings or any, public meetings to talk about a rezone I don't know how those are going to work. You're not going to push 500 people online to talk. Let's say that we were talking about the Olympia Hills thing that just went through. How would you do that right now?
Right.
I can't even imagine how. A lot of the things that we work on you'll have maybe 30 at the max people surrounding you. So cost of land higher than ever before. Do I see the cost of land decreasing? I actually don't. And this is where I argue with some of my other land buddies. Some do, some don't. My thought is if you don't need to sell, you're just going to shelf it. The sales will happen based upon, deaths or, the transfer of a property to a family trust that needs to get rid of it, something like that. But if you don't need to sell land, why would you discount it right now?
Well, even if you did have to sell it, I mean, it's not like if you had
if
you had the land for 50 years, I mean, so what? You're not getting $1 million, you're getting 900 grand. Whoopee,
Exactly, not enough to impact the end buyer for sure.
No.
Cost to develop land is up 50% over the last 6 years. Something that's new to us in Utah, and it's not new to others in California or Vegas or certain things, is that the cost to actually develop and improve the ground to get it ready for home sites is equal to or more than the cost of land.
Right.
And I'm seeing that in 50%, maybe 60% of the deals. Last year it was 20%. Before that, you'd never have seen it. So the cost to actually improve the dirt is higher than the cost of the dirt. And builders have been able to push that through to the end consumer via lower interest rates and still pretty good affordability for new home construction if you look at us versus most of our Western neighbors. City fees, that includes permit impact fees, continue to increase at record levels. They're definitely not going down. the cost of water has skyrocketed as well. And, you know, that's the, you know, I love the movie The Big Short. That's the next one to look for is water. The water will not decrease. In fact, in certain communities, certain municipalities in Utah County on the northwest side, they've gone up every year, the tune of about a cumulative 10 grand increase in water over the last 36 months per lot. And then direct cost to build the homes, you know, maybe they'll get some scale or some economy if, you know, hopefully we don't lay off too many people in that industry. It doesn't seem like we are. Maybe there's some relief there, but I doubt it. And then I do think that spec building will almost stop. Maybe you'll have 1 to 2, but I don't see you having, right now you can go into certain subdivisions from big builders and you have 20 specs going on. I don't foresee that. And then the smaller builders, the ones that are, you know, a large part of our economy, they'll probably have a model home and 1 spec, but I don't see, I see specs almost stopping immediately. So that's kind of, you know, those are some
financing on the
points.
spec homes too.
Sorry, George, what was that?
No, just the financing for spec homes is a completely different game than it was prior to 2008 as well.
You're
Yeah.
talking about from the builder's perspective.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
even from the builders, just from the builder's perspective, because I mean, look at Barnes Bank and Beehive Credit Union. I mean, they put themselves out of business funding
Yeah, I was
specs.
going to say,
Yeah.
who?
So
You know,
Mhm.
so
yeah, right. Yeah.
So Jason, so you're saying that because spec homes are going to disappear, not disappear, but they're all but disappear. You know, the existing ones will continue to be built, obviously, and some of these builders have, you know, they're working with their own cash, but and so that's just going to add to the shortage of inventory.
Yeah, it's this catch-22. It's you know, the new construction industry, new homes wise, did we need a little bit of a break and a slowdown? I mean, nobody will say yes, but I think that maybe to catch your breath and say, okay, because really, if you look at this, we've been on a 10-year cycle of acceleration, and so
Right.
I think everybody, if you asked them, and I love Jim Wood, he's always been kind of a mentor of mine through the industry. You know, he talked, I think, at the end of last year at the review that we do downtown as realtors. He talked about, look, we're on a 10-year. You know, somebody asked him about recession. He's like, well, you know, it's been a decade. You know, he's like, we'll probably slow down. You know, will we go flat? Well, I don't think he said we dip. He said we might go flat in certain areas, but he's like, what else do you want? You know, been going hot for a decade. Like,
Right. It's
can only
got to
last
eventually.
can only last so long. And to that point, First American Data Services has a review they do at the end of the year, and they were talking about, you know, in 2018 there are 1.2 million household formations and only 860 household units built, so a shortage of 340,000 units, which is staggering. So,
And of course we have a higher percentage. You know, our ratio of people coming of age is higher than most other states. Then not only that, then we have a lot of our Western neighbors moving here because of their, you know,
Right.
whatever's going on there. You know, we have more jobs, we have affordable, you know, although our prices have increased dramatically, we're still quite affordable to areas like the Bay Area and things like that.
well, we definitely have a diverse economy too. Like my sister lives in Vegas and she works in the industry, and so she
Yeah,
has
casinos down, everybody's gone.
she has a job at Vidara and she has a job at the Four Seasons, you know, in the future now. So she's
Right.
been ripped from both of them, where they literally, it's a ghost town. I've got family out there, and it's just shut down because they're so dependent upon 1 to 2 industries where we're extremely diverse.
And
you
that's
know,
intentional for sure.
You know, we're lucky in Utah. We're slow. Are we any smarter? I'd like to say so, but I think we're slow. So we just
Yeah,
don't
but
get
that's a
don't get
genius
ourselves in
design.
trouble.
That's a genius design. You know, we're slow to jump on a bandwagon, but like, you know, like you watch the California market, they shoot straight up. You know, we're usually lagging behind them. So California goes up and then straight down, where we kind of you know, we flatten the curve, if you will, right?
Yeah, we're
the
super
new
boring
buzzword.
stock.
Right. But that's okay.
The analogy I use is we go to the party late, drink half as much, if at all, and then we leave early. So
Right. We have less of a hangover.
One more data point that I thought was interesting from Jim Wood, and then I'll stop talking because you know me, I can go on forever.
No, that's
Um,
3 data nerds, man. That they're. I hope they're still awake out there. you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. See the snooze factor somewhere.
Right.
Jim had talked about, every year since World War II, the housing prices have gone up. In some of those years, maybe it was like a quarter point, but except for 6 years, and 4 of those were during the Great Recession of 2008 to 2012. But we had, as George mentioned, we had, so much supply, rates
Right.
were higher. We had all these other things that we don't face right now,
No.
and to forecast, everybody wants the forecast. I don't know, do we
No.
go flat this year? Possibly. Even if we did go down 5 to 10%, which I don't foresee, the interest rates would act accordingly, and then your affordability as a buyer is no better. So when people, let's say that you're an agent out there and you're getting these super low ball offers, just, my opinion, just decline them right now. I don't know.
Right.
That's for you, the broker, though.
Yeah. I mean, so from what I'm hearing is if the spec homes are going to, decrease, which is going to add to the, less supply, I don't see the demand slowing down. I mean, we're getting the phone calls. Well, I'm just waiting for prices to drop. Well, because their only experience with housing has been the Great Recession.
Right.
And so, which they don't understand that the Great Recession was it was the perfect storm of real estate, because real estate collapsed.
It was our own fault.
Yeah, real estate collapsed, which caused everything else to collapse, where we don't have any of the, I mean, like you said, even if we took a 5% dip, which I don't really see that happening, but if people got in trouble, they can just sell their house and walk away with a bundle of cash.
Tons
I
more
mean, so-
equity this time.
Yeah, I mean, the last time
we
yeah,
used
we
our
were
house as
upside
piggy
down.
banks. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they were ATM machines, and banks were just giving the money away. You're not going to go and refinance your house and get 120%. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So the odds of you being
Right.
upside down are slim, just because of the speed or the amount of growth we've had in equity. And if you bought a house 5-6 years ago, I mean, the equity growth and just a little bit on the pay down
Insane.
part of it, it's the appreciation is just high. So I mean, if I had to sell my house today, I mean, it wouldn't be a disaster, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd put people to work and
Well, and you'd
include
probably be
moving
a
companies.
landlord's dream right now because you could pay your rent.
Right. Yeah, I can give them a year in advance if I sold my house.
Mhm.
I mean, I can give them many years in advance.
I do work with a lot of apartment institutions, and they definitely have some
They're sweating right now.
big time. And I think a lot of it's real. I think there's also some bandwagon jumping on saying, I'm going to take advantage
yeah.
of this.
Yeah, I'm not going to pay. Yeah.
One other thing that this is, one term that I heard the other day, and I think it's important to talk about, is a financial crisis is different than a recession.
Right.
Recession, you're looking long term, and George can probably talk to this better. Are we on the verge of maybe a financial crisis? For sure, but we don't have a variety of issues that push us towards that financial crisis. We just have one big one.
Right.
It's
Right.
It's
Solve it and
scary.
it's over.
It's scary and it's a concern, but we're learning more and more each day. If we had a recession, you're talking about issues everywhere. Now, will this financial crisis cause unemployment, things like that, and push it towards that way? Sure. But it wasn't where we were attacked on all angles, or not we were attacked, but it wasn't like we were getting hit from all angles like we were last time in the
Right.
recession. So,
Right.
Yeah. The last time then when it, like you said, when you tried to refinance an investment property that loan didn't exist. And I remember that was the beginning of the end. When they stopped doing this, the 20% seconds, that happened because I remember July, and this was Salt Lake County, July of 2007, we had about 1,500 and something closes, but then, and then like August, we had like 900. It was like,
yeah. Well, and I
it's
remember
like walking in the woods and you heard something, you're like, I don't know what that was, man, but something just.
It was literally,
out
it
there.
was the second week of July. I still remember this to this day. And my buddy said, I don't have the loan anymore. I'm like, what do you mean?
Right.
He's like, I don't have that whole portfolio. I'm like, we'll find it.
Right.
we were,
Yeah.
80% of the way through financing an investment property, and that ended that.
Yeah, he's hitting enter. I don't see it anymore. Any other thoughts, questions? Deb, anybody asking questions on the Q&A?
Anybody
No,
awake?
I think they're just listening to everything.
So if anybody has any Q&A, just please go ahead. If you're on Facebook, I apologize. You may be commenting on the Facebook.
No, I'm monitoring Facebook too. I don't see any
okay.
comments on it, but a lot of people are
Good
just
job,
watching.
Deb.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
I
Deb.
multitask
Rob, I had,
really well.
Yeah. Rob, I just had a thought on something because I've had a few comments, phone calls, questions and stuff, because the Federal Housing Finance Administration, which is the FHFA, has
Right.
announced this forbearance on certain mortgages and, things of that nature. And I think it's really dangerous for people to get the idea that they can just not
Stop
make their
making
April house payment.
Sure.
Yeah, and they think that somehow this is not a forgiveness. So
Right.
There's an agreement that they're not going to start a foreclosure process. They're not going to actually go to trustee sale on foreclosure processes that have started. There's an abeyance, if you will, on there for about a 60-day period. But when that's over, that stuff is going to resume, and anybody that skipped their payments, they're not going to just tack it back onto the end of the loan and extend out the term of the loan. They say, hey, if you had a couple of payments that you had skipped, and the other thing is too, there's some subjectivity to this because you have to be able to qualify, showing that you were affected because of the virus situation, that it was directly related to that. But you're going to have to pay the money back. That money's going to have to get paid back, and it's going to probably have to get paid back in a structured repayment plan. And it's probably going to be a year to 2 years, kind of similar to how a Chapter 13 would restructure on your mortgage payment. You're going to be expected to come current, stay current, and then start paying some extra amount on there. Maybe it's 5% per month of what your arrears are, but this isn't. It's not a forgiveness.
Right.
Forgiveness is different than forbearance. Forbearance means, the consequences are coming. We're just holding off on them for a while. So I just think people need to understand that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, George. I had a client send me not a postcard. They sent me a clip or a picture in the mail of their lender. And what was very interesting is they had, it was like April, May, June, 0. And then July, it was like 8,800. So it was the combination of the 4 months, but it was due on that 4th month. And I'm like, yeah, and they didn't have to, but they thought it was interesting. They're like, look at this thing. Like, we're talking about forgiveness, forbearance, but if I did this in July, I got to come up with $9,000. So,
right. Well, and the thing is that they're not going to make them come up with the lump sum, but it is going to be there's going to be some sort of a workout. Like I say, if you were, so let's just say that your payment was $2,500 or $3,000, you come up with a third of it. They're going to take that $6,000 and they're going to chop that into installments and say, okay, now you got to start making your regular payment, and then you're going to have to add another $500 a month or something, to that. It's going to be reasonable, but it just don't take a holiday on it too much right now. And if somebody wants to, be aware of the items. If you're not able to stay current on your bills, be aware of the difference between items that report to the credit bureaus and items that do not. Okay, so don't shoot yourselves in the foot.
Okay, we did have one question. How do you factor in the wave of people that are going to be missing their payments? Restaurant workers, restaurant owners, space that business owners rent, etc.
Well, I think George was just touching on it. They're not going to do the foreclosure. So I don't see and a lot of that depends on how long this is going to last. Again, that's why I titled this episode, whatever you want to call it. Are we going to crash? Not definitively one way or another. We're just, that's the question. And then we're giving you data that we know to be fact. And so what we don't know as a fact is how long. So if people are missing 1 or 2 payments, I don't think that's going to start a wave of foreclosures because George mentioned it. There probably, there are some safety nets that the government's putting in place, the federal government saying, people that are affected, they can get a forbearance, meaning, they're not going to start the foreclosure or any of that. They're going to allow them to catch up. And again, and my opinion is, and George concurred, I don't see this going on for a long, long time. The American people just aren't going to allow a government shutdown of the economy. They're just not going to allow it. Because this isn't like we said, mentioned so many times, this isn't a housing crisis where the housing crisis collapsed the economy. This is a government shutdown of the economy. So, the government can say tomorrow, all right, everybody, stay at home is lifted and the economy's roaring again. Now, people may be getting sick. I say buy stock in ventilator companies and stuff like that. But it can be, with a flip of a switch, the economy's roaring again. So,
yeah.
So I don't know if that helped, if that answered your question or not. So Danae posted something in the chat. She said, I got this morning, why U.S. housing bubble 2.0 is about to burst by Jesse Colombo. And it was in Forbes, And so the problem with, a Forbes magazine speculating this and stuff like that, number one, they're a media company, right? And that's a headline that's called clickbait, right? If you view my post on Facebook where I talk about media and all its forms are in the business of making money. They're not in the business of bringing you the truth. They're not in the business of bringing you facts. They use a couple facts. They're crafty enough to write their story enough to defend themselves in court. However, their headlines are usually a disaster because people are like, oh my gosh, I got to read the disaster. As soon as you clicked on it, you got to see all the ads, right? You ever try and read an article today? My God, it's like dodging through a swap meet or something. It's like, man, they come at you. These ads are popping up in front of you. You scroll halfway, every paragraph, there's a new ad in the middle of the paragraph. That's the whole purpose of that headline, is to get you to see the ads, because the more people that click, the more they can charge, because they monitor an ad's space price is determined by the number of clicks that are in their ad articles. So just stay away from that stuff. Turn the TV off.
And Rob, one point on that, even if there was a little bit of substance inside of that, we've talked about this. This is our Utah special.
Right.
Markets are so
local in nature.
So local in nature, micro nature. I mean,
right.
I can talk to you about, I can talk to you about areas in Utah that have a little bit of oversupply, but there's maybe, they're very few. And I can show you, 3 miles away, an area that's super undersupplied. And now, obviously, I'm talking mostly new construction again, but you've got to look at these articles with a big grain of salt in the fact that our markets are so micro niche now, based upon product, based upon area, based upon
jobs,
so many different factors.
What's going on.
Yeah, I always give my clients the analogy. It's like saying that the national weather forecast is 72 and sunny.
Right. 90 in Miami.
That's
and
just
30
where
in
Rob
Alaska.
is.
Right. It's 78 and breezy where I'm at. So any other thoughts, questions, concerns from the weblands out there? Any comments no more comments from Facebook, or questions at least?
No, I'm not getting any from Facebook.
Okay. Well, I hope if anybody, go ahead.
Marcia says on Facebook, I didn't catch the number of units that we're short.
New construction wise?
Well, I would say that between the,
3,000 something. It was a big number.
So yeah, is there a number to say how many people, like you mentioned that there were like 1 million something new household units created nationwide?
So
what's our number is that?
2018, the end of it. So it only got worse in 2019. There are 1.2 million household formations. This is obviously nationally. Let me just grab the source. And this is off the First American data tree that analyzes all sorts of housing statistics. So there were 1.2 million household formations by the end of 2018, and 860,000 housing units built. So a
Great.
shortage of 340,000. It didn't get better in 19. I remember the numbers being even more of a gap. So even if we went totally flat, we're still way behind. Obviously on the local level, there were roughly 15,000 new single family homes built in Utah last year, and there were 1,187 permits pulled. So that's about a 26% shortage. And
So
those are
15,
closing.
you said 15,000 to 1,100. So
Oh, sorry, 15,000.
11,000.
That's a lot. 15,000 and 11,872 permits pulled. And think about the permits being pulled as well, because that's another lagging indicator. Because you know, when you pull a permit, the house isn't done. That's the start. So you've got another 6 to 8,
6, 9
months.
months, right?
And
Right.
Kevin from Facebook says, how do you think it's going to affect investors in rentals? And do
Single
you see
family, like smaller
foreclosures
ones or smaller rentals or big ones? Like
He doesn't say.
apartments? Okay.
Yeah, do both, I guess.
Well, for the apartment units, since I do work with quite a few people in that category, and I've been talking to them a bunch over the last 10 days, there's some nervousness there for sure. You know, there have been numbers being thrown out, 25 to 40%. You know, think about, I've got one client / friend who has a 30-unit apartment complex downtown that we would call C space. Most of it's filled up with bartenders, waitresses. You know, the downtown scene is extremely vibrant right now. He's nervous, you know. So you've got some of these other institutional investor ones that can maybe ride the storm better, but I'm hearing 25 to 40%, and it's really, you know, knowing who your tenants are would be a real issue. On the single family side, I don't know. Hopefully not. I've got, you know, a fair amount of them I've talked to. I think one of the biggest keys, if you have them, is reach out to your tenants.
Right.
Talk to them.
Don't wait till the first to find out you're not getting any money.
Yeah, today could be a surprise for a lot of people. Mine, fortunately, are in jobs that are pretty strong, knock on wood, and are hopefully insulated for a while. You know, but at the same time, you know, if they can't pay the full amount, you just got to get on and talk to them quick, talk to them early,
Right.
and
Collect as much as you can. Yeah.
And
So-
we had, George, this is for you. Margie's wondering if the missed payments on the forbearance that you were talking about before, are they going to be reported to the credit bureau, do you think?
So the short answer is no. The guidance that came out from the FHFA last week said that they would also suspend negative reporting to the credit bureaus for 60 days, and that was effective March 13th. So that would assume, the way that I read that, is that an April payment or a May payment that was late, as long as you are, and again, I mean, if you know you're going to be in that situation, I mean, don't not pay it and then wait for them to call you. You need to be proactive if you're in that situation and call and explain why you're asking for a forbearance and everything else. But no, the understanding is that there's a 60-day moratorium that will not be reported. And I would assume that if you're in a workout agreement after that, that your mortgage would continue to report current and paid as agreed.
Okay. And Sharon wanted to know, she said, I noticed that interest rates went up recently. When do you see them coming down? Get out your crystal ball.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting comment, and I'm surprised that somebody actually, because, you know, the only thing that people see is, you know, Fed cuts rates to zero, right? And so
Right.
that's, everybody's just like, oh my goodness, George, lock me at zero.
They're giving away money.
Yeah, and right, and there's about as much correlation between that as there is the, you know, the price of oil and whether or not the cheese in your refrigerator has mold on it. But the Fed actually came in and probably overdid it. I mean, there's, you know, the Fed has all these tools at their disposal, and the question that historically everybody looks back and they don't question for most of the overall policy of what the Fed did, but it's the dosage. You know, did they lower the rates too much, too fast? Well, they needed to lower rates, but did they do it in the right increments? Did they buy enough commercial paper, treasury securities? Did they do enough QE, QE2, all of that stuff? And the consensus right now is that last week, the Fed basically did a little bit too much. They bought too many mortgage-backed securities. They artificially created a shortage of real mortgage money being available. And of course, if there's a shortage of a commodity, the price goes up. So that's what happened last week. And the Fed, the last 2 days, so far, Monday and Tuesday, they were scheduled to buy $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities, and they only bought half of what they were expected to. So if the Fed dials back a little bit, because I think last week they realized that they overplayed their hand a little bit too much, and it really caused some chaos. The feeling and the hope is that if the Fed moderates back a little bit on those purchases and allows real, not bailout buyers, but real, people that are actually closing homes and refinancing and stuff like that, that we are going to see those rates. They're starting to settle back down again. So yeah, I don't know that we're going to be back, in the twos, but I think we're definitely going to be solidly into the threes, and we're going to be in the threes for, I mean, if I had to make a guess on it, I think we're going to be in the threes for most of this year. I mean, there's always other stuff that could come into play, but if the Fed just kind of allows the market to kind of get back to normal, and assuming that, come May or June, this is past us, I think we're going to have great low interest rates. And I think the mortgage lending guidelines are going to stay common sense, which is what we have right now. And as long as that prevails, and the housing demand and everything else, we don't have anything to worry about with the housing market or with interest rates.
Okay. Sharon also wanted to know, is this affecting the refinance market, both owner occupant and investment property right now?
Yeah, there was an article this morning that mortgage applications last week dropped 24% from what they were the previous year. But I mean, they didn't specify, well, what kind of applications? Were those purchases? Were those refinances? So yeah, I mean, there might be a little bit of a glitch in there, but overall, I have not changed my personal goals and what my expectations are for the year. I mean, I haven't changed any of my forecast or expectations for me or for my office. I think we're just going to have, I think this is, I said, whatever doesn't happen over the next 60 days here is just going to kind of build up behind the dam. And when the dam opens back up, it'll all come back out again. And it's just a matter of, can we keep the pace? I mean, I think we could be at I've got buyers, some buyers out there right now, and I'm going, man, if you are looking at homes anything less than 400,000, well, this is probably the week you want to try and go out and start putting something under contract.
Right. Yeah, I think it's an opportunity for buyers based on, not, when I say opportunities, I don't mean you're going to go out and get this like screaming deal of like 20% below value. No, the opportunity is you may not be competing against 25 buyers. You might only be competing against 8 rather than 20 buyers.
You might be lucky enough to be able to, you could get the house at full list price rather than having to overbid it, maybe.
Right.
So.
Right. Exactly. Any other questions out there, Deb?
Nope, I haven't seen anything else. Oh, wait a minute. Kevin says, do you think there's going to be a slow or fairly quick rebound after the quarantine's passed? I think you've kind of addressed that.
Yeah, I think after the quarantine, because it's not so much because it's a one issue crisis. And once the crisis is eliminated, then I think the bottleneck will, like George just described, it's going to happen. We're going to have you're going to have your annual goals are probably going to happen. They just may not happen as incrementally, like George just explained. You may have a little bottleneck here, but as soon as it's over, boom, there's going to be a flood coming in, and then that flood will get you back to normal in about 2 months.
Onto that point from the new construction so I literally talk to land acquisition VPs for most of the builders on a weekly basis. They already have 2020 full of their inventory. They always are looking 24 months ahead. So 2020 inventory was either closed on late last year or closing in the first quarter. They're continuing with the 2020 closings. Out of the 10 that I work with, top 10, when you go off of, unit counts, talking to 10 of them, 2 have pulled back on contracts for 60 days. 6 are going forward and looking to double down. And the other 2, we're still kind of waiting for corporate to make a decision. But, you know, when they say 60 days with land and a land contract, that's nothing. I mean, those things
Yeah,
can drag on for a year. So,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
so on the new construction side, you know, they're locked and loaded for all the 2020 and a lot of them for half of 2021 product already. So, they're, you know, 2 of them were like, you know, we're going to get aggressive actually, because we see a lot, you know, we see the potential for people to either drop their land contracts or hum and haw. And if you're a seller, you don't care. You just don't care. There's
Right.
no loyalty in the land game.
No.
And so, from the land perspective, it's continuing to move forward. Maybe a small pause, but they're not going to shelf anything by any means because they're already so behind on
Right.
supply.
Yeah. And
Sure.
I'm coaching my agents to double down on their
Their
marketing.
marketing for sure.
Yeah. Because you mentioned earlier, Jason, you're saying the traffic in a model is lower, but the number of contracts
Very
being
good.
written are not lower. So it's actually a higher quality traffic.
Yeah, your
And I
density's
think a
better.
lot, yeah, you're just getting anybody that's is responding to a lead, you know, a lead capture, you know, ad or anything like that. They're going to be motivated. They're going to be real. So, I mean, right now, double down. You're actually going, because in a normal market, you have buyers or sellers anywhere from 2 days to 2 years out. But I think anybody that's responding to advertising now is anywhere from 2 days to 30 days out, or maybe 60
sure.
days out.
For sure.
So I would double down
Right.
on my marketing. Your leads may be, you know, if you're going to get less leads, but they're going to be way higher quality. And that's always the dream, is high quality leads.
Here's kind of a little bit different question. Kelton wants to know, what about Airbnb type investors?
Mm.
Are we going to see foreclosures there? Do they fall under the same rules?
On the
That would be George, I
Yeah.
would imagine.
you know, I'm going to defer that one to Rob and to Jason because you know, that's, you know, I mean, that's a non-owner occupied loan. I mean, that's, you know, that's probably a better question for Rob and for Jason. So
on the Airbnb, because they're, you know, I've been lucky in my career to get into so many different industries and contact so many different people. There's, you know, there's a similar segment to apartment type stuff. I have quite a few clients / investors, friends that have done a lot with Airbnbs down in southwestern Utah, in Nevada and California, and all their bookings have dried up. But the problem, and Rob can attest to this, is that, and even George, once you sign on that dotted line of the mortgage, it's your responsibility. So I don't
Right.
foresee, you know, and I haven't really looked into how the, hate to call it bailout, but that's just what I'm used to from last time. How the funds for this type of need are going to go through. That I don't believe that people are going to feel bad for anybody with a secondary home on an
Right.
Airbnb versus an owner occupied.
yeah, I don't, going back to that, maybe the question you're asking for is, I mean, is there going to be a forbearance and forgiveness and all this other stuff?
Yeah, I think
One of the
that's
nice
what he was
things
trying to
about
say.
what, you know, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, I mean, they require for investor properties right now, if you're going to go out there and buy an investment property, you got to have 6 months worth of mortgage payments in arrears for every house payment that you have. So if he's got a primary residence that's got a $2,000 a month payment and a rental property with a $2,000 a month payment that he's been Airbnb-ing, you know, he's got to have 20 to have been able to get that property if he's bought it any time in the last 5 years. I mean, he had to have had 6 times $4,000, you know, of liquid assets to be able to do that. And the reason they're doing that is because Fannie Mae is not in the business of creating, you know, real estate billionaires. I mean, it's primary residence. And then, and if you want to pick up non-owner property, we're going to do that. But the qualifications, the guidelines, the debt ratios, the down payment, the interest rate, the reserve requirements, everything is more stringent. So I would not expect anybody that has investment properties, and this includes myself, you know, that you're going to be able to get a vacation on that. I'm pretty sure that you should limit your expectations to your primary residence.
And investors like that, if they have these secondary properties, again, the value is there. In other words, if they got in trouble, they could just sell it. It's not going to, I don't see a wave of foreclosures because people just have enough equity to just sell their house or sell their property.
Right.
And I mean, if you had 5 short-term rental type properties and you bought them all 2-3 years ago, and if you sold them all today, you'd actually have a bundle of cash. So I don't,
Correct.
you know, it may be a problem for some of those people that own them, but I don't see it really affecting the real estate market. I just see it, you know, a small rush of new inventory that will gets just absorbed right up. I mean, I think if our inventory increased by 10% right now, it wouldn't even slow it down. I mean, it would just get gobbled up in certain markets. Now, let's be clear, there are, you know, real estate is local in nature.
Okay, JR says there's been plenty of talk about Fannie and Freddie and also FHA and VA stuff. George, any idea on some of the non-QM stuff, forbearance, etc.? It's probably something that you've already gone over.
No. Yeah, you're not going to get a forbearance on any of the non-QM loans. Those are only for agency loans. And that this dovetails on the conversation I was having with my friend that runs a hedge fund back in Chicago that does non-owner stuff. He's reevaluating his entire, you know, game plan and everything else, just because that, you know, he knows that those loans are going to be going in. He knows that he's going to have some of his loans going into default because some of the people that have been doing some of the non-QM, you know, hard money, non-owner type stuff. Let's face it, a lot of the lenders, if you want to call them lenders on that, they're actually hoping just to purchase property at a discount. So they're okay. They're okay taking the property back and selling it right away because
Their money's protected.
It was bought right. Correct. Yeah. They've got a good equity position. That's their insurance. Their insurance is the equity.
Right.
Charles just commented, he said, I'm hoping that some of those Airbnb owners sell so that helps the inventory shortage.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt.
It'll get gobbled up real quick.
Yeah. It's not going to hurt. I mean, it certainly would help a little bit, you know, and it will get gobbled. In other words, there's not going to be enough of them hitting the market that's going to really make a difference.
Yeah.
It's interesting if there were something like that though. I have a whole stable of clients that are hoping for
Looking to buy
that. They're cash heavy.
Right.
So, you know, they can hope, and I don't foresee that helping them too much, but there's a whole group of people out there with a ton of cash that are ready to rumble. So
Right.
Right.
Yeah, they'll get absorbed and they'll hit the market. And like you said, they're not buying properties at the courthouse steps anymore because they're going for retail pricing. You know, so if anything hits the market, I mean, you know, you can't underprice a house. If you list a home and put it out to the market, I mean, you can underprice it if you're only talking to one buyer, but if you underprice it and put it out to the market, it'll bid straight up to the natural value, sometimes more. You know, what I teach agents is, look, let's say the house is worth $350. If you list it at $350 or say $375, you know, it'll sit and sit and sit. And then finally it'll hit $350, you might get $345. But if you were to list a $350 house from the day one at $340, you'll actually get so many offers, it may go for $355. You'd actually net more money by offering at a little bit lower price right up front than you would if you listed it higher and hoping to get more. It's interesting that even in the shortage we have, if you are, I mean, like 2, 3, maybe 4% overpriced, I mean, you'll sit. It's just amazing that, you know, the accuracy of that line, or, you know, how thin that line is between, you know, you're going to get 10 offers or you're not going to get anything.
interesting,
You know,
Rob, because that's maybe even market irrelevant if you price that way. That pricing structure can work in every type of market.
Right. And not even just now, but everything is now, it's higher pronounced in this kind of climate, you know, when you're short. But even in a normal flat market, if you're just a hair underpriced, it'll bid up, you know, maybe not as many offers. So, but it'll still bid up. Yeah. Cash loves deals. I mean, you know, you're not going to undersell. You know, I always say money's the easiest part. you know, if you're out there thinking about being an investor, if you have the right deal, money's the least of your problems. Right.
Well, I think that answers everybody's questions, and we're 10 after the hour, so
Wow. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then I want to say thanks to our guests, Jason and George. I mean, awesome. I thought this was a great meeting, if you will, episode, whatever you want to call it. I guess we're, you know, coming from the world headquarters of Aubrey and Associates right here in Cotwood Heights, you know, my world headquarters on the beach. So, but
Yeah.
stay tuned.
Well, thank you, Rob.
Yeah, we're going to do another episode on housing affordability, how it all works. We're going to kind of work through some of the numbers and how that's working and what that looks like. So we'll do a little more research on that, and we'll see you guys soon. So anyway, thanks, Jason, George, and
Thanks, Rob.
and thanks
George.
to
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank
thanks
you,
to
you're
Jason.
Debbie.
welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie.
Debbie's the wizard behind the curtain. So see you guys.
Indeed.
Always
Okay.
need
All
one
right.
of those.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.